Well, it only took 4 years of development, but in August of this year, I finally released my first indie game, Farewell North, and, well, I made a lot of mistakes along the way that cost a lot of time and money. But you know what you can't put a price on? Knowledge. So I figured I'd share a few of the lessons I've learned so that hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. So let's kick off with some good news. Yes, game development can provide a sustainable, full-time income, but it's tight. Farewell North launched with 60,000 wishlists and currently has over 100,000, to 98% positive Steam reviews and an 80 on Metacritic. According to market data from VG Insights and Gamalytic, Farewell North's revenue puts it in the top 5% of all games released in 2024, which is fantastic. But that hasn't actually been enough to break even. It will break even very soon though, and based on projections, should be enough to fund a few more years of development on the next game, so that's a huge success, and I am eternally grateful for that. It's just that it's going to be tight. The salary I'll be earning is nothing compared to if I just went out and got a job. On the other hand, I get to make games, so I'm definitely not complaining. Now, I definitely don't say that to brag or to scare you off, depending how you look at it, but it's just a bit of a reality check. It's possible, but it is not easy, and it is far from guaranteed to earn a living making games. But game dev's a business, and like any business, we have two main levers at our disposal to make it more sustainable: cutting costs and increasing revenue. Reducing costs is the first lever to focus on because it's the one that's in your direct control. For games, costs will largely depend on your scope, your fidelity, and ultimately your development time. So keeping these in check are the best way to keep your budget in check. I didn't do that, and honestly, Farewell North was too expensive to make. More than $100,000, and that's before you consider my time to have any value. Obviously, I wasn't drawing a salary. In order for this to be sustainable, I need to be much more disciplined going forward. That means no more 4-year development cycles. I need to get that down to 18 to 24 months, which really means making a game I think I can make in 12 months, because games always take longer than you think they're going to. I mean, I thought Farewell North would release in 2021 after all. I've also come to learn that your choice of genre definitely influences the cost of the game, and that non-combat adventure games are particularly well suited to racking up bills. And that's because you don't have anything to reliably fall back on like fights or combat sequences. You constantly have to create new mechanics, new environments, new animations, new music, or it quickly feels repetitive and you lose that player engagement. But no matter the genre, there will always be costs because games are expensive to make. That's just how it is. So you also need to find ways to increase revenue. Now, just making more money is obviously much easier said than done, but there are tools at your disposal and additional revenue streams you can look to try and supplement that income. Now, I'm not gonna lie, console ports can be very difficult, and for most devs, they won't make as much money as Steam nowadays. However, it still could be the difference between loss and profit. I can't share the exact numbers because of the NDAs, but for Farewell North, consoles make up about 20 to 30% of the total revenue, so it is a substantial boost. You just need to figure out if that added revenue is worth it because porting is expensive. You have a few options when it comes to console ports. You can work with a porting studio or a publisher to do the ports for you. I chose to do the ports myself, that way I could build the tools and the knowledge to port all my future games and kind of recoup that initial investment in learning how to do the ports across several games. Personally, I think that's the best way to go, but I would not recommend it unless you're a strong programmer. I also did Steam Deck and Mac ports, and we didn't do a native Linux port, but we did a lot of testing on Proton just to make sure it works. Now, I don't get Steam Deck specific revenue reports, but I know that Mac and Linux make up about 5% of the total Steam revenue, so it's small, but every little bit helps. Again though, you need to make sure you're weighing that added revenue against the cost of porting and really supporting those platforms. I would highly recommend doing Steam Deck certification though. It's pretty painless, it's not nearly as bad as consoles, and there's not really any excuse not to do it. The harsh reality though is that games just don't sell at full price, so you really need to be on sale as much as possible. On Steam, there's a 30-day cooldown at the end of each sale, so you can be on sale about 10 weeks of the year, plus the 4 seasonal sales which are exempt from the cooldown. You can offer permanent discounts in the form of bundles though, which allow you to pick up multiple games at a discounted price. For Farewell North, about 15% of all of our Steam revenue comes in the form of bundles, so it's quite substantial. You can even see this little weekend spike here. Farewell North was not on sale at the time, but another game in one of the bundles was, and it gave us a huge boost in sales. So those are some of the levers you can pull on to make your game more sustainable, but the biggest factor by far in whether your game succeeds isn't consoles or social media or bundles, it's the game itself. The very first thing you need to do is figure out exactly what you're making. Now, that sounds totally obvious, but it took about 2 years for me to figure out what Farewell North even was, and I see a lot of devs making the same mistake. See, I've always described Farewell North as an atmospheric and emotional adventure game where you play as a border collie restoring color to your human's world, and that works great as a tagline, but it doesn't really inform the game design, and it doesn't put Farewell North into a clear genre. This lack of clarity led to years of feeling around in the dark trying to figure out the design of Farewell North, and it made marketing a real challenge. Farewell North doesn't fit cleanly into the wholesome, cozy games genre because it's too dark, but it's also not a horror or a thriller. and it has puzzles, but they're too basic for someone looking for a puzzle game, and there's no combat, so people call it a walking sim, but someone looking for a true walking sim probably isn't thinking of a game with mechanics like Feral North. It's also not a cutesy dog game, but a lot of the marketing aims towards that. All of this means that Feral North's presentation is confusing. We had a really hard time getting into some events that seemed like an obvious fit because we'd constantly have to explain ourselves and justify, no, I promise you, Feral North is a wholesome game, seriously. Once players actually pick up Feral North, we know that they love it. It's just getting them to pick it up in the first place, getting them to understand what the game actually is, that's the hard part. You may think that you want to make something so unique that it completely stands alone in the sea of games that are releasing, but honestly that's not really the case, at least when it comes to marketing. There are of course exceptions, but in general, players want to play games that are similar to ones that they already like. You definitely need to stand out, of course, you can't just create a clone of something that already exists, but you're better off innovating within a genre rather than inventing something totally new, or kind of loosely straddling the line between opposing genres like Feral North did. Everything from your key art to your pricing to your trailer to your graphics should very clearly demonstrate who this game is for, what you do while you're playing it, and which genre it belongs to. And you only really get this by deeply understanding the game and the audience that you're targeting, and really the signals and the tropes that they're looking for to find games that they like. The good news is you can very easily solve this by doing a little bit of planning and market research. Now, I know market research is never as fun as just getting into the engine and actually making a game, so as I plan my next title, I've been using Skillshare on the side to hone up my game dev skills and have a bit of fun. Oh wait, you guys don't know about Skillshare? Well, that's perfect because they're the sponsor of today's video. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts. When you're making a game, there is so much to learn, and Skillshare provides classes across game design, animation, 3D modeling, illustration, and so much more. When you get started, you'll be asked about your interests, and from there Skillshare immediately surfaces recommendations tailored specifically to your goals. I recommend diving into their learning paths, which are a great way to pick up all the skills you need to take your game or your business to the next level. Through making Feral North, I really learned that my core game dev skills lie in crafting narratives, tech art, and coding, but I would really like to improve my game design skills before starting my next project. So I've been loving the learn the fundamentals of game design by making a board game in one day class, which taught me how to prototype a game's design as a board game before diving headfirst into the engine. You guys also know that I am not a strong animator, so with the back to school fall vibes and a little bit of downtime after releasing Feral North, I really want to improve on my animations. I've been exploring the Build 3D Model and Animations with Blender learning path to do just that, becoming more comfortable with animation and improving my skills. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can start learning shaders, game development, animation, or dive into something completely new. So make sure you check out the description and follow the link to get started today. Now, obviously you should be making games that you want to make. The lesson here is just that your game dev business can be made much easier by deeply understanding your game and what players are looking for. Find gaps in the market that you can fill based on your skills and your passions. At the end of the day, you don't want to make something just because the market wants it, you should be passionate about it as well. Once you've honed in on the exact game you're making and who it's for, that's when you can really focus on marketing. The fact is with marketing that the game itself, its genre, its quality, its presentation is by far the biggest marketing decision you will ever make. But no matter what anyone says, there are definitely some things you can and really should be doing to get the word out there. When you talk about marketing, social media is usually the first thing that most people think of, and honestly, it's a bit of a mixed bag and really a full-time job. YouTube devlogs are way too much work for the amount of wishlists you're going to get in return unless you have like the perfect personality for it, which I don't. They are great for getting feedback and really learning how to present your game, but in terms of a marketing tool, I don't really recommend them. TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts are probably the best options you currently have in terms of social media for generating wishlists. But they are all becoming quite difficult, and personally, I've lost the touch. There are also very valid concerns over whether TikTok views actually turn into sales, but I would say that's a topic for another video. Twitter and now Blue Sky are, well, frankly bad for marketing, but they're not nearly as bad as everyone says they are. They're probably the best tool you have to organically connect with streamers, publishers, event organizers, so you really should be using them, they just shouldn't be your primary marketing plan. Overall, social media is very hit and miss. There are very few people who can post banger after banger, and I am not one of them. But the real reason that you use social media isn't so that every post takes off, it's that once in a while one post will do crazy numbers, or it'll reach the eye of one very important person that'll make all the other kind of failed posts worth the effort. You can think of social media as a bit of a lottery ticket. You're not hoping to win every time, you're just looking for those occasional winners that pay for the rest, and thankfully they win more often than lottery tickets. But more important than social media by far is making a demo and getting into events. Now you're probably aware of Next Fest, and you definitely should be doing it, but it's not necessarily the best event on Steam. You really need to be researching and applying to the smaller, more focused events, because the best events are the smallest events with the least number of games that still happen to get front page featuring. This is where you can really get massive wishlist numbers. You never actually know if an event is going to get a front page feature, so just like social media, you're applying to as many as you can and just hoping for that occasional winner. You can find these by networking with other devs, and again, Twitter and now Blue Sky are great for this, and joining Discord servers like How to Market a Game, where they have a special bot which lets you know when event deadlines are coming up. But the real secret with marketing is that it changes every day. Every time a developer finds something that works, we all seem to flood in there and crowd each other out. From Imager to TikTok to events in just a few years, and I'm sure the next one is right around the corner. But the biggest marketing decision you'll ever make is the genre and presentation of your game. This never changes. It's critical, far more important than your choice of social media or whether you make devlogs. So spend time on this, spend more time on this than you think you need to. You're committing to potentially years of work, so make sure you're setting yourself up for success and planning and making sure that you're making a game that's actually marketable. Just one last thing about marketing, streamers and influencers are undeniably important. They just weren't really a part of our marketing plan for Feral North, so I can't really speak to them. They are important though, and definitely something you should be looking into.
Oh, it's so pretty up here. You gotta come see this. Beautiful flowers and shit.
Most of us are playtesting wrong. Before we get into that though, the biggest thing to know about playtesting is that you need to be playtesting sooner than you think, like right now. The earlier you get feedback, the easier it is to incorporate. Your game's like concrete. While it's wet, it's malleable and you can still shape it, but as soon as it sets, it becomes very rigid and prone to breaking. Right, so how are we playtesting wrong? Well, most of us are treating playtests like QA sessions, like a big bug hunt. And of course you do want to find bugs, but that's not really the primary focus of a playtest. What you're really after is an understanding of how players are experiencing your content, and how that fits with your vision as the designer. There's a great tool for structuring your playtests to make sure you get the most out of them called the MDA framework. MDA stands for mechanics. These are the rules, actions, and logic in your game. Dynamics, which are the player behaviors and strategies that emerge from those mechanics. And aesthetics, which have nothing to do with visuals, are the emotional response from the player. Your job is to create mechanics and observe dynamics and aesthetics. After watching a few playtests, you can then go back and refine your mechanics in order to get the desired dynamics and aesthetics. And then you just repeat this process over and over until you get the dynamics and aesthetics that you're actually after. Now, I can't stress enough how important it is to actually watch playtests. It's infinitely more valuable than verbal feedback. Players might be biased, they might not want to hurt your feelings, they might not be able to accurately describe their experience, and they might not understand what your intended experience was and how their experience actually aligned with that. You're much better off observing and asking questions, but make sure you have some way to observe, whether that's watching it live or in a video recording. You want to get a wide range of feedback with as many different playtesters as you can, but try to take every bit of feedback with a grain of salt, whether that's from a partner, a publisher, a playtester, your mom. You have to take all that feedback, distill it down, and decide what actually fits your vision as the designer and what doesn't. But there's an entirely separate form of feedback that I didn't even know existed, and that's mock reviews. See, many journalists will offer mock reviews as a service, where they'll review your game as if they were writing it for, say, IGN. The cost will definitely range, but expect it to be a few $100s depending on the journalist and the game, and you probably want to do a few of these. Now, before alarm bells start going off, you are not paying for good reviews. These cannot be published, they are strictly private. The point of the mock review is to get a sense of how your game is going to review ahead of release. This can be really useful to shape your release strategy. Do you have an early embargo date and send out a ton of keys if you think it's going to review well? Do you maybe have a later embargo and hold those keys back if you don't think that the reviews are going to be great? But doing mock reviews early could also potentially help you go from, say, a 6 to a 7 or a 7 to an 8 if there's some common feedback that the reviewers are focusing on. See, most reviewers will give you a score, and they'll also give you a ballpark average of what they imagine the average score is going to be, and they'll let you know what they think that reviews are going to focus on, whether that's critiques or praises of specific things. But the real benefit I found with mock reviews didn't come until release day. See, I was a mess going into release. I thought the game was garbage. I thought we would be lucky to scrape by with, I don't know, 50% positive Steam reviews. I was just in a bad headspace. But the mock reviews really let me breathe for the first time in a long time. They weren't perfect, but they were much more positive than I was expecting, and they even had some very deep emotional connections to the game. Release day wound up being the calmest I had been in months, and I think that really started with the mock reviews kind of putting me at ease and letting me know that I had made a game that was worth playing, and thankfully when the real reviews came in, they tended to agree. Alright, scope. Scope has been talked about to death in the game dev YouTube space, and that's great, because it's extremely important, and I largely agree with the prevailing advice. You should make more games, make smaller games, have your ideas and have them again. That's all well and good, but there are always going to be opportunities to increase the scope of your game, whether that's more levels, more animations, more music, more polish, you name it. So how do you actually decide what's worth it and what isn't? Unfortunately, there is no clear answer, but I have found a pretty good filter to help with this. What I've come to realize since release is that players don't really care about all the tiny little things that you think they do, but they can still be very important. It's up to you to decide when, and that is not an easy job. For example, I implemented physics on Chesley's Tale in Farewell North, and no review has ever brought that up, no one's ever really commented on it, but was it worth the development time? Maybe. In this case, I would say it was, because it enhances the core experience, the core fantasy of the game, which is playing as a border collie. On the other hand, I spent a ton of time on the canoe mechanic, and it's tough to say because it'd be a very different game without it, but I would venture to guess that that's no one's favorite part of the game. Most people are pretty lukewarm on it, and I think that's because it doesn't really enhance that core experience of playing as a dog. Most people picking up Farewell North want to play as a dog, and canoeing doesn't really fit into that. Now that's not to say that a little bit of variety is necessarily a waste, but perhaps the development time that went into the canoe mechanic was not proportional to the value it added to the game. When you're scoping your game, aside from all the exciting temptations, you also have to make room for the kind of mandatory features that make an acceptable game in your genre. For example, for PC games, if you don't have key rebinding, you're most likely going to get some negative reviews about it, so it's almost a minimum requirement. You're not going to get praise for adding it, but you'll definitely hear if you don't. These kind of insidious hidden requirements can quickly balloon your scope, so it's pretty important to understand what they are early. I would recommend reading negative reviews of games in your genre to try and understand what players are looking for as kind of minimum acceptable requirements for a game in that genre. Once you have those kind of mandatory requirements in place, focus in on the core experience. What is the fantasy that players are looking to live out through your game, and make sure you nail that. You want to keep the scope small, but it needs to be highly polished. This is the lens you really want to look at any new feature through to make sure you're not getting off track, forgetting about the core experience, and adding unnecessary scope. When it comes towards release, crunch is real and crunch is brutal. I worked for years in tech startups and I thought I was pretty accustomed to tight deadlines and really bad scope management, but nothing prepared me for the final few months of Farewell North. 16-hour days, 7 days a week for months and months, and even a few all-nighters as we got down to the wire. For months, I left the house literally twice a week. Once to meet Joe, the voice actor for Kaylee, and once to get groceries. And in the final month, I didn't even get to do those. I was really depressed. It was a dark time and I really questioned whether I wanted to make games or whether I even wanted to finish Farewell North anymore. I sacrificed my physical and my mental health for the game, and nothing is worth that. You need to take care of yourself physically and mentally or you're going to burn out. I really thought you could just tough it out, but you can't. There's way more that goes into launching a game than you think there is, so make sure you keep the scope in check so you can focus on what actually matters in the final months of your game's development. When you're working on a game, it feels like the most important thing in the world. Like you need to spend every waking minute on it, or the game's gonna be terrible and you're gonna be a failure. But the reality is, the world isn't stopped waiting on your game. Life goes on and you need to enjoy life. You need to enjoy making games. So the biggest piece of advice I can give you in this video is to get off the computer, go outside, and you'll feel better. You'll be more inspired, and you'll make better games. In order to keep the scope of this video in check, I'm gonna end it there, but I could really talk about the mistakes and lessons I learned on Farewell North all day. Feel free to leave any questions down below, or ping me on the Farewell North Discord and I'll be happy to talk about it. Thank you so much to all of my patrons who directly supported me throughout Farewell North's development, and continue to support me as I start the next adventure. A special thank you to my Magpies, and my Osprey supporters Elegon, Purple Sloth Studio, Jason Hansen, Ellie Swaley, Raven Painted, and Justice Lind. If you stuck around this far, I really appreciate you. Now, get outside. Until I post another video, then get back inside and watch it. Okay, bye.